since humans kind of moved toward agriculture as opposed to hunting and gathering, and then really even making that massive leap from these farming cultures into this industrial revolution just 250 or so years ago. I mean, our environment has changed at an exponentially growing pace.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, and plant medicine. In this week's episode, my guest is Anthony Lorubbio. In addition to being a Wim Hof Method Instructor, Anthony is also the founder of Recal, a wellness company that specializes in mindful adventure travel. After experiencing burnout himself, Anthony took a pause, reconnected with his authentic self through breathwork, nature, and mindfulness practices, and founded Recal to help people that are facing a similar situation. Under Anthony's direction, Recal's designed guided retreat-style trips that reconnect with nature and ourselves as humans. Anthony, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's awesome. We connected not too long ago, and immediately I saw so much commonalities that we have, and between Wim Hof and breathing, but also this idea of reconnecting with nature as human beings. And I think right now there's more need for it than ever in terms of our society, and we'll get into a lot of that. But before we get into our discussion, I was sharing before we hit record here, I just came off another podcast interview, and you came up with a cool idea to maybe do a recalibrating exercise of breathing to kind of center ourselves. And I thought it would be really cool to do that on air for our audience that might want to follow along with an intentional breathing practice. So I'll let you take it from here.
Sure. Yeah. Let's kick this off. I know we were just kind of spitballing about how we could maybe increase some energy, get things going, because I know you're going back to back now, I think. So, and yeah, anybody out there listening as well, if you're not driving a vehicle or not in water at the moment listening, and you're looking to maybe boost your energy levels at the moment, we can tap into a little breathing technique. This comes from Jesse Coomer specifically, so I want to make sure that he gets the shout out for this. It's a 4-1-8 kind of box breathing technique. He calls it competition breathing, which just increases your energy levels, can kind of enable you to laser focus as well if you're looking for that, but not also be super frantic and kind of like full of energy, so much energy that you can't control it. So yeah, 4-1-8 competition breathing. So go ahead and sit down in a relaxed posture. Let's take just a deep breath in through the nose and out either your nose or your mouth, relaxing your shoulders down just to get centered here. And we'll begin breathing in, 2, 3, 4, hold, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Deep breath in, 2, 3, 4, hold, and out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In, 2, 3, 4, hold, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Take a deep breath in just to bring ourselves back and out. You can open your eyes if your eyes were closed. Hopefully that helped get yourself refocused and energized.
So good. I love that. I love that pause, the hold for 1 second in between the 4 and the 8, because I practice, a variation of that, whether it's 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or 4 in, 8 out. But it's really nice having that 1 second to just pause.
Yep.
And yeah, I'm not sure specifically what is happening there with the 1 second of a pause, but it's nice to have that in between the 4 and the 8.
I can't speak to exactly what maybe Jesse's philosophy is behind that 1 second hold, but it is on the full lung. And typically, if you're holding anything on a full lung, it's a little more of an
Yeah.
activation, kind of energizing style thing. So I think he maybe gives you that 1 second just to pause, gather,
Yeah,
and
it's
then
nice.
start to let that go and kind of down regulate with that long exhale as well. So you're activating, but you're
Mm,
also focusing down too.
yeah. Yeah, it's really nice too for people that might have, kind of what you were sharing in the beginning. It's like it's a nice balance between if you are in a state where you're um, overly activated on the sympathetic side, like it's a nice balance to downregulate, but also have a little bit of energy as well, so you're not getting too downregulated and sleepy.
Hmm.
Because obviously, something like a podcast interview, I need to be alert and aware, but also a nice reset from a previous conversation or podcast recording or whatever it is that you came a meeting, something you came from before. So that's just an awesome tool to have in our tool belt throughout our day.
Yeah, for people going back to back to back meetings, needing to be on consistently, yet switching gears multiple times throughout the day. I mean, with all of our crazy
Hmm.
lives and jumping from this into that, I mean,
Hmm.
who you are, while obviously your goal is to probably be consistent throughout your day with who you are, but the persona or the version of yourself that you have to bring to one meeting may be completely different than the one that you have to go into literally a couple minutes later. And especially with a click of a button here, going from video meeting to video
Hmm.
meeting, that's a whole nother level of this. So just to have
Yep.
that moment, want to keep your energy levels up. You don't need to necessarily run for another pot of coffee here real quick. Just do a little breath work, get yourself recentered and focused, and kind of jump into your next thing. Yeah, it is like you
Yes.
said, it's a nice
So
tool
good.
to have on the tool belt.
Yeah. So good. So I'd love to start off hearing more about yourself and how you got to where you are today in terms of being a newly Wim Hof instructor and this idea of connecting with our breath. Was that something that you've been interested in a while? Like, where can you tell us that kind of backstory of how you discovered things like breath work and cold exposure and being in nature, and where you got to where you are now?
Yeah, good question. So I have not necessarily been long in this breathwork realm and the Wim Hof realm. It wasn't
Hmm.
too long ago that I was coming out of the original company that I co-founded out of college. I started a distillery with a couple of co-founders out of college. Ended up running that business for a total of 8 years. Real grind, true startup nature, going from absolutely nothing to something. Built it into a pretty nice sized business at the peak, at least while I was there. We had around 50 employees and profitable, growing fairly good company, really, foundationally. But it took a lot of blood, sweat, tears, effort, energy, and everything like that to really
Hmm.
build it to that point. I had kind of an unfortunate falling out with my former business partner, and immediately following that, I jumped right into a role with a private equity firm that I thought was kind of this life saving opportunity, like I was being thrown a life raft or something because I was swimming out in the deep end, and I didn't really take enough time, I think, to myself to really figure out, all right, this incredibly traumatic event just happened. Kind of part of my identity in this business that I had built and ran for a long time now is no longer a part of my life.
Mm.
And I jumped right into the next thing, which was full of its own set of grind and honestly a whole different type of business. Um, for me was this experience in private equity. I did not last that long. I was an operating partner there, so I was the guy that went on site to the businesses that we acquired and would turn them around or carve them out from the corporate parent that we acquired the business from. Um, and honestly, it was a real grind. And um, I just continued to kind of send myself downward, beat myself into the ground, kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
and finally, I think when I took a moment and realized, okay, this is probably not for me. Um, I had to take a step back, like you said, kind of in my bio. And what I did was kind of something that I only thought was actually natural to do, which was go out into nature and engage my
Mhm.
body and my mind in new ways, be really physically active. I rented a camper van for like 30 days, and I ended up picking it up in Denver, and then I just, with no real direction, just kind of drove over to the Grand Canyon, and then I went over to the
Nice.
coast of California and up the coast and into the redwoods and back across like Tahoe and into Utah, and just completely quieted the outside world, which was something that
Mm.
I thought stressed me out when I was in those positions of running my own company and then being an executive at these private equity owned companies. Was just, there was a flood of noise and distraction
Mhm.
and responsibilities, and it was really tough. I remember just having the thought of, I just want to just turn down that volume, just turn it off
Mhm.
maybe all the way. And
Mhm.
I'm really grateful I gave myself that opportunity to really turn it off. And that was my own kind of Recal trip of sorts. On my way back, so I spent a total of 60 days kind of on this recalibrative sort of experience. On my way back to the quote unquote real world, I remember being very nervous about the stressors that were going to maybe re-enter my life, being back around the noise and the distraction, and the things that really sent me down on that downward spiral to begin with were about to
Mhm.
re-enter. And I'm so lucky, on my drive from Denver to Minneapolis, which is where I now live, I listened to the Wim Hof Method audiobook,
Hmm.
and I had been
And what year
trying,
is this?
this was actually 20, the very beginning of 2021. So not that
Dang,
long ago.
it's so awesome how new this is for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is new for
So,
sure.
so you're listening
Yeah.
to his audiobook on the drive back.
Yeah. Listening to the audiobook. And while not driving everybody, I pulled over and went to a rest stop, and I jumped out and I did the breathwork protocol that he explains in the book. And, for the first time in my meditative practice, in my
Mhm.
journey in meditation and mindfulness that I had been really working on, and especially working on this trip, for the first time, my meditation was complete silence after the
Mm.
breath work that I did. So, and that really, I mean, it just jumped out at me like, that monkey that's always just chattering in my mind. After this breath work, it really quieted down. And so I thought, okay, this is a tool that I could maybe use as I re enter the noise and the distraction and the stressors of the daily modern life that I'm about to re
Mhm.
enter. This could be a great tool for me. And so I really got into breath work that way. It became very quickly a daily habit. And then when you started to incorporate the cold elements, that brings your mind to a whole nother level of quiet. And all of these tools really became clear to me. Okay, I think I can recenter, recalibrate myself on a daily basis by using some of these tools.
Mm.
And so that's kind of been my journey, kind of to get into Wim Hof method and breath work and everything like that.
It's amazing. Yeah, dude, there's a lot of commonalities here with my story of getting into all of this. And by the way, I love that you took action so quickly to be introduced to this method and very quickly pursue that path and become an instructor and bringing that into your Recal business. Like, there's just so much goodness here. But
Hmm.
same thing, like this whole entire world of breathwork, cold exposure, meditation, for me also plant medicine, like all of these things I've incorporated into my life in the last couple of years started with learning about Wim Hof method. For me, it was on
Hmm.
different podcasts. And it wasn't that long ago either. It was a couple of years ago. It was like end of 19, early 2020. And realizing that you have a tool at any time that you need it most.
Yeah.
If it's a time where you are in a state of, panic or frustration or anger, or you just want more energy in your day,
Or
like
jumping
literally
from
just lay
meeting to
down
meeting
or jumping from meeting to meeting. And it doesn't always
through
have to be a
various
20
breathing
minute,
protocols.
right? Exactly. So it doesn't always have to be like deep Wim Hof, Tumo style breathing. It can be like that is very energizing, but sometimes it's just as simple as doing like what you worked us through in the beginning, the 418
Hmm.
method. It's taking
Yeah.
literally 60 seconds to recenter.
Mhm.
And if you're not doing that intentionally, you're living life like you and I have in the past, where you're always in that activated sympathetic state.
Mhm.
You're just grinding, go, 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 and that's when you are burning out. That's why we're going to get into here in a little bit about this concept of burnout. It's like how many people are living like that, and they're not even aware of the state that they're in, and that the fact that they have control to change their thoughts and their feelings and how they show up, how their day turns out. We can't control everything, but there are certain things we do have control of, and our breath is one of those things. So,
Yeah. That is so true. And actually that took a long time for me to understand that concept that you just hit on. And it took a lot of therapy sessions and a lot of things to understand that there's the thing over here on that maybe impacting us in some way, but we consciously have a filter in between us and the thing that through
mhm,
that filter we can decide how or not really is that thing going to impact us. So that stressor, that person, that manager that we have, that boss, the drive to work itself can be stressful. I mean, at the end of the day, we're getting into a little metal box and we're like flying really fast
yeah,
to our job. That itself can be stressful. And by the time we show up to work, we're already kind of drained from that experience potentially. So having and knowing that there is that filter in between that we can intentionally decide and be conscious about it, that all right, this isn't going to necessarily just impact me you know, unwillingly or without me putting much thought or consciousness to it. Having that filter is
mm,
really important. And I think the tools like the breath work and a mindfulness practice in general um, are that filter for us.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mentioned I'm living in Chicago, and I used to hate driving in the city, man. It's like you step into that car and you're going to be in a high state of stress for the next 10 minutes or an hour, depending on where you're going.
Yeah.
Bumper to bumper traffic. I mean, aggressive drivers, people cutting you off, honking, sitting at red lights, like just pure stress for for a while. And now that I have something like breath work, I'll literally just do down-regulated breathing while I'm driving, like kind of like what we were doing, 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out, in moments
Hmm.
where I feel that surge of stress coming up.
Yep.
And now my driving is not stressful anymore. It's
Yep.
of course not perfect, but it's not that same level of stress like it was before. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about this concept of burnout because I've been there, you've been there. I'm sure a lot of people that are listening have been or currently are in that state of burnout, and they just
Hmm.
don't know where to turn to. So, um, we, especially in today's society, it seems to be a very prevalent thing.
Hmm.
What do you think is the primary cause behind this burnout epidemic?
Yeah. That's a good question. Big picture question for sure.
Mhm.
What's the cause? And I don't want to bucket people or things too much here in my answer. And I'll give certainly my perspective through my set of lived experiences. And I think what really caused a big part of my burnout and what I believe, and some of the principles that we've packed into Recal, what we big picture, I think, believe are some of the reasons for burnout. But I don't want to make it sound like this is applicable to everybody. So just like
Sure,
I guess as I answer a very big question, I'm just going to take a small bite here. Um,
sure.
I, there's been a few things that I've really dived into recently, and which actually started to dictate some of the direction that we went with Recal, and I'll get into to what Recal is, what we do, and how we address this problem. But just to start with the problem of burnout. Um, Actually, to mention Jesse Kummergen in his book, A Practical Guide to Breathwork, A Remedy for the Modern Human Condition, the concept of the modern human condition, um, which I'll explain what it is, that concept's really started to bring to life a reason for burnout. Same thing goes with something called the the theory of mismatch evolution or the evolutionary
Mm,
mismatch theory. And
mhm,
what these things state, modern human condition or evolutionary mismatch theory state, is that our bodies and our physiology and our mind, all these inner systems that we're kind of rolling around in today's world. And they were adapted over thousands of years based on the environments in which we were in at that time. And over years and years and years, your body, it adapts, it changes, it selects, so to speak, to use the Darwin sort of term there. It selects over something in tough times, but based on the environment of the world. And that environment kind of is very slow changing over thousands of years. And we kind of continue to create alignment between how our body reacts to something and the environment that it's in. Well, over the last, I mean, since humans kind of moved toward agriculture as opposed to hunting and gathering, and then really even making that massive leap from these farming cultures into this industrial revolution just 250 or so years ago. I mean, our environment has changed at an exponentially growing pace. And really where we land
Mm,
today in the modern world is so vastly different than the environment in which our body was really raised or grew up in. And so again,
mm,
that's where you get this concept of the mismatch theory can really plays out. And it can be a simple thing like we talked about. You're driving and we don't even really realize it because everybody's out here driving all the time. It's just our mode of transportation. But really, that is a stressful thing. Our body is screaming at us, somebody just cut us off. That's a life or death situation. And boom, our sympathetic nervous system kicks in, our heart rate increases, we start to metabolize more glucose because we got to be ready to fight or flight. And we're sitting in this chair in this enclosed environment, and we're expected, because it's socially acceptable, to not necessarily freak out or try to go fight or flight or all these
mhm,
responses that our body's telling us. So that's one example. There's many other examples of this mismatch. I mean, right now I'm sitting under a bunch of artificial light. I could be doing this at 2 a.m. just as easily under artificial light. Well, our body has a certain circadian rhythm to it, and at night, we think it's normal to just flip on a switch and these lights can come on and we can kind of act like it's daylight. Well, our body is not used to that at all. I mean,
mhm,
we're running the same DNA and genes that we've had for thousands of years. It gets very confused in that example of a situation. And so there's so many examples of that play out in our lives. And over time, it's our belief that kind of eats at us. It kind of erodes away our ability to stay centered, and we start to really waver off of center. And that's where the concept of really burnout comes in, because it has such a not only physiological impact on us when we're living in misalignment with like what our body and mind is telling us, but really, really psychologically over time as well. It just kind of beats us down over time. Um, and the struggle is finding like an outlet for that. Understanding
mhm.
and being able to listen to what our body's telling us and then acting on it is sometimes hard to decipher what our body's telling us. And so this concept of the mismatch theory, I think, is one of the real reasons why I believe that we've run into burnout in this, especially in this era of video calls, sitting in our insulated offices and our homes and climate controlled environments, and kind of not really unleashing the inner human inside of us. That I think
Mm.
is one of the biggest causes for burnout. And I know that I can speak to that personally, which is why maybe I had that itch to just jump in a van and go be in nature for a while. So, and that's a part of, then it comes to what we offer kind of at Recal, the outlet for burnout. But I think that's kind of my summary of the statement of the big picture problem behind burnout.
Yeah. No, it's such an important topic. I don't know if we spend enough time, sounds like a generalization, but as a whole, modern day society, I don't know if we spend enough time focusing on that aspect of that disconnect
Hmm.
between humans and nature, or humans and our ancestors, how we were designed to live and to function. And of course, like, that's part of society, that's part of the human experience, is that we're going to evolve, we're going to make progress. That's the goal.
Mhm.
But then
Mhm.
the irony of that is oftentimes it's like one step forward, two steps back in terms of progress, right? Like our goal is to progress as a society, but then oftentimes the progress that we're seeking leads us to taking a step back, like actually going backwards in terms of our health, our mental health, our happiness.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
like the irony there is we're pursuing better health and convenience and happiness and more time to do things that we love and things like that. But oftentimes it leads to overwork and burnout and not
Mhm.
being in alignment with our mind and our body and our spirits. And then you get into the rat race of life and you get into these habits, sometimes bad habits. And
Mhm.
all of a sudden you look around, you're like, what happened? I'm like constantly working. I don't have enough time for my kids or my spouse or my friends or things I used to love to do. I just don't have time to do that anymore because I'm pursuing this goal of more money, bigger house, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, especially in Western culture, like we've all kind of been there at some point to some degree.
Mhm.
And you mentioned a super interesting word is that outlet. It's like, okay, so what are outlets that we can use? For me, it's breath work, meditation, yoga, movement, um, just having some sort of mindfulness practice, having a few minutes to go for a walk, sit in silence.
Mhm.
Being in nature is a big piece. And obviously that's the avenue you've really narrowed in on is getting back into nature. And that's what you're doing with Recal. So with all of that being said, what do you think, in terms of a wellness travel company in the world, there are plenty out there. What do you
Mhm.
think sets Recal apart from any other wellness travel company that's doing something similar to what you're doing?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. And I think it speaks to our approach to the outlet. You listed off quite a few there. A
Hmm.
reconnection with nature, that definitely is a great outlet. Breathwork, mindfulness, yoga, physical activity. What we're focused on is combining really three core elements of those outlets. The first one, of course, as I mentioned, the reconnection with nature, and I'll get into what that really means to us. A mindfulness practice, including breathwork, and adventure. That's the adventure travel component of this. We're definitely engaging our bodies along the way on these trips. What kind of, I think, sets us apart in a way, from other wellness retreat companies, or there's a lot of companies, especially big corporations, that are selling wellness travel. What I've witnessed and seen is a lot of those are going um, this is going to be comfortable and relaxing for you, and give time to yourself in a way that, through massages or get pampered and kind of catered to. And that's great. Nothing against that approach. I know that that has its time and place, and absolutely all for it. We at Recal are going kind of in another direction with that. We're actually, I think, we are leaning into the uncomfortable nature, no pun intended
Mm.
there, of a form of an outlet where, for example, we have our Quiet Park trip series. We partner with an organization called Quiet Parks International. They go out and they find the quietest places in the world. And it's really nice
Mm.
here in the only named quiet place that they've named yet globally is actually down in the Amazon. And it takes 2 flights, 3 flights, depending on where you live, uh, a long car ride, a long boat ride, a unmotorized boat ride, a 2 days worth of macheting your way through the Amazon to like reach quiet, which is kind of incredible
Mm.
to show how hard it sometimes takes to reach pure quiet, aka the least amount
Mm.
of human made noise, and there's no human made sounds anywhere in within earshot. Um,
Mm.
but we have a couple of places here in the U.S. that actually are upcoming named places. Some parts of Glacier National Park, and then the Boundary Waters Canoe Area in northern Minnesota. Those two places are where we've focused on, and we created some trips around that. So, but with these quiet places, beautiful raw forms of nature, those are not places that our modern conditioned bodies and minds are used to being in. It's actually very uncomfortable for,
Mm.
it's interesting to witness this. It's very uncomfortable for us to go into a place that's just pure nature. Even though we are born and bred through that, and our body actually probably feels more in alignment there, our mind can be running and telling us this is not a place for me. So as opposed to going the wellness route of being comfortable, we're actually kind of creating an uncomfortable way, but also challenging us in a way to recalibrate. So going into raw nature, that is one way. Quiet itself is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. It's very challenging sometimes for many whose mind is always engaged in racing and listening to podcasts and listening to news or reading the news or talking to friends. You kind of, these days especially, you're always in this state of constant connection and information absorption. When you turn that off, that can be very challenging for a lot of people. And what we pair with, not just the fact that we're going into quiet places, we're pairing that with mindfulness practices to help quiet our mind in the quiet places. That's like doubling down on the uncomfortable nature of what a trip can be like. And then you throw in the
Mm.
fact that on top of the mindfulness practices, we're also going to be doing some canoeing and camping and portaging in the boundary waters, or we're going to be doing some biking and silent hiking in areas in Glacier National Park. Those are all, that whole combination of things. Again, we're really seeking discomfort out of the trips, but at the end of the day, knowing that that can enable us that outlet opportunity to kind of reconnect with ourselves and our ancestral ways and create more alignment for ourselves. And then through that recalibration, we can then kind of go back and hopefully have a few more tools in the toolbox to face the stressors of modern life, so to speak.
Mm. Sounds absolutely amazing. Like, obviously, going on a trip is cool in and of itself, especially somewhere beautiful in nature. But you are taking that experience of a canoe trip, a hiking trip, and just amplifying it through things like breath work. If
Mhm.
I'm somebody that is interested in going on one of these trips and I'm like, I kind of know what breath work is, how cool is it that I can go to the boundary waters and also have somebody there to lead us through breath work, you know,
Yeah,
and
I,
yoga?
and to speak to that for a second, um, what we have found is you can lead someone into quiet, but along the way in the quiet, they'll be manufacturing noise within their mind. They'll be thinking
Hmm.
about something in the past, maybe something they wish they would have done differently, or they're projecting something out in the future. Like when this experience is done, I've got this deadline or that meeting coming up, or this is
Yep.
happening in my life. And that comes down to the mindfulness coach that comes on every trip. We have Recal coaches. You've had one actually on the podcast, Brittany Lilligard. She's running one
Hmm.
of our Ho Rainforest trips in Olympic National Park in June. And so, for example, Brittany will be leading people through mindfulness practices like breathwork to quiet that monkey in the mind so that we are
Hmm.
in the quiet externally, but we can then intentionally create quiet internally as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something for me with breath work. But even before breath work, it was meditation. It was that idea of being able to quiet things and quiet that monkey mind, like you said, or
Mhm.
just the constant thoughts. I'll never forget the first time I sat down to do a meditation. This was a while back, like 10 years ago. Just sitting there for a minute. I had the hardest time to just sit in silence for 1 minute. And it makes
Mhm.
sense. Like, if we go our whole lives not having that experience and just always being in modern day society, emails, texts, TV, going to meetings, conversations, I mean, just constant noise, constant distraction and stimulation. And then you go to just sit down in a quiet room or out in nature for 1 minute, and I couldn't do it. I was just like
Mm.
thoughts bouncing all over the place. And it's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you
Yeah.
get at it. And then you do that for a couple weeks, you're like, oh, cool. Now I can actually sit here for a couple minutes. I still might have a lot of crazy thoughts and can't quiet the mind, but I can at
Yeah.
least sit still for 5 minutes now. And then after a few months, you're like, cool. Now I can actually quiet those thoughts. Now I
Mhm.
can actually let them be and then just let them fade away. And when you get into that state, it's like, wow, this is awesome, man. This is what we need as humans. I think,
Yeah.
especially in today's world, we need some time to just reset. And that's what you're doing here with Recal.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, that's the definition of a practice, though. You basically just hit on that. You couldn't do it for 1 minute, but then through practice over time, um, it can
Hmm.
become something that you can do. So that's great, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch on this idea of what you're doing on the trips, like in terms of this mindfulness and connecting with nature, connecting with who we are.
Mhm.
You have, whatever it may be, 5 days a week of resetting for the folks that are coming on your trips. It's a nice way to reset, reconnect, recalibrate.
Mhm.
But it really is in its nature. It's something that is temporary. It is a 5 day trip or however long these trips are. What are some ways that Recal helps people stay centered when they're not on the retreat? After the retreat, they go back
Yeah.
into to modern day society, back into the real world, their lives. What are some ways that they can continue that?
Yeah. No, that's you're hitting on one of the challenges for sure of a company like this is it, and if we're honest with ourselves, of course, we do know that that moment for the trip, that's really temporary, and it's a moment where they're not in the place that brings up the stressors for them. They're able to
Mhm,
let go a little easier when they're actually out on the trip, but that they can ride that high for a week after the trip, 2 weeks after the trip. I mean, we've heard it through feedback and whatnot on these style of retreats and everything that it just doesn't last forever. And
mhm,
also changing habits is not an easy thing either. So let's just say, for example, you're on our early June trip to Glacier National Park. That's part of our Quiet Park Trip series. It starts on like June 2nd. You're done by June 6th. And while it was an incredible experience, you got to experience the quiet. We did some silent hiking up in like Lake Kintla area, northwest part of Montana. I mean, most beautiful, pristine, quiet place.
it's
And
gorgeous.
you owned it. You let it happen that way for you. You really came in with an open heart and open mind to all the experience, and that's a beautiful thing. You're about to board that plane and you're about to go back home, back to what on Tuesday. The trip ends on a Monday. On a Tuesday, you're back to the grind, so to
Mhm,
speak, and expected to
mhm,
perform and be that same person you were. Little by little, and over a pretty quick period of time, you could fall right back to where you were. So we
mhm,
recognize that, and so some of the things that we're building out to hopefully help with that transitional period and how to stay centered when you're not on a trip. The first one is every one of our trips somebody gets a Recal journal from us, and this Recal journal, for those that either have a journaling practice, this could be something in addition to or a supplement or maybe a different way of looking at it, or if you've never had a journaling practice, it can be an through the modules that we have, which we have a monthly module where you fill out once a month, a weekly module you fill out once a week, and then you also have a daily um, practice as well. It's got prompts, it's got things that kind of can ease you into this journaling practice along the way. And on a trip is a really nice way where you've created space for yourself to be able to maybe pick up a journaling practice. That journal, of course, comes with you as you go back home, and in it are things like, you know, a habit tracker. Did you meditate today? Did you do breath work? Did you do some cold exposure to quiet your mind? It's got lines also for you to write in other habits that you're trying to develop. So there's a way to track that. The prompts that we ask are things like, a gratefulness practice in the morning. What were you grateful for from yesterday, or what are you looking forward to today, or what caused you to get off center yesterday, and maybe how
mhm,
can you try to center yourself in that same moment today. So again, by nature of it being a journaling practice over time, I think the Recal journal can help as like a supplement to their lives when they go back home. The other thing that we do is, between myself and other Recal coaches, we've got a consistent supply of breathwork and mindfulness coaching happening, whether that's live streams or recorded sessions or things like that. And people that have gone on our trips, of course, can get this type of information free because, hey, they're part of this group of people that have gone on a Recal trip. So that's a really nice value add, I think, for the people that join. Um, and also to the journaling practice, you actually will get your next set of like 3 months worth of pages for the journal, because it's like a 6 ring binder, so you can swap out the
Mhm.
pages and throw back into the leather bound journal that we have, so you can kind of keep going with the journaling practice. The next thing is, on the trip, you probably developed a relationship with your Recal coach. We offer, one-on-one sessions afterwards, and you can continue that coach to client relationship after the trip is over. That's also, I think,
Mm.
a really nice thing as well. Um, we also teach some situational breathwork strategies, not really on the trip, but we provide this type of information after, so that when they're going to jump to that next meeting, they can do a 418 breathwork technique, or they can. We have various situations call for a different type of breathwork. Before going into a
Mhm.
meditation, maybe you want to do a 4-7-8 style or something like that breathwork, or you can do so many things with breath, of course, and every situation
Mhm.
might dictate a different type of thing. So we help give training and tools on that as well. And the last thing that I would throw out there, not to drone on any longer than I already have on this, the
No,
last
please.
thing that I'm super excited about is we're also building out a mastermind program here at Recal. And people that have gone on trips are kind of going to be the first ones to be able to possibly join a spot in our mastermind groups. And they cover four main things, or four pillars to the mastermind group. And this is kind of in beta mode at the moment, but by the end of this year, we're going to be off and running with this. The first pillar is mindful leadership. So, in your position of leadership in the business realm, how are you incorporating mindfulness into that? And there's so many ways that will help keep each other accountable for that. And you'll have an ongoing network through our monthly meetings as well, to kind of check in on what type of mindfulness
Mm.
practices you're keeping going. The second thing is, how are you reconnecting with nature? And so, each week and month, we've kind of got different suggestions or challenges to people on how they reconnect with nature. If you do fitness in some way, and you're a member at a gym, what we're going to do is challenge you to do something that we call our mindful adventure fitness program, which is like once a week. It's a workout that's designed to be done outside, and immerse yourself in nature, engage your body. It also incorporates some breath work beforehand that gets you ready for the workout, and then a meditation afterwards. And also, the journal has a mindful adventure fitness log, so you can actually log that
Mhm.
workout in your journal. Um, and again, you're part of this mastermind networking group that holds you accountable to all these things, and you're not alone in doing this. The third pillar that we work on is conscious capitalism. So we have one of the consultants that's been trained in conscious capitalism come and speak on some of the principles about how you can incorporate more sustainability, regenerative practices. Think big picture. Don't just think extractive means of capitalism in your business world. There's other ways
Mm.
that we can operate business, and so that kind of speaks to more the business realm, but also how can we maybe do better, kind of side of thing. And then the fourth pillar is just our challenge and growth. So it's, what is the one thing that you are really scared of? Name it, own it, and do it for this
Mm.
upcoming year. So that's kind of our once a year, that one big challenge. Are you trying to run that marathon? Are you trying to travel to this place that kind of, maybe, are you maybe going into the quiet and you're really scared of how your mind is just going to be running wild? Are you going to do a 10-day Vipassana, silent meditation retreat, and really scared of doing that? Say it to the group, own it, and we're here to help you hopefully do it and then grow from it. So those are
Mm.
all of the suite of things, I think, that we're trying to incorporate outside of just a pure moment in time of a trip, that will help you stay in calibration throughout your modern life.
Mm. Dude, I love it. It's like you're not just offering a retreat or, a trip that they can come for 5 days or a week, or it's like, okay, go back to your life.
Hmm.
You're not doing that. Like, you're actually saying, here's what we offer for our extended trip, and then take this back home with you. Make this a part of your lifestyle through journaling, through breath work, through mindfulness, and keep it as a consistent practice. And I love that. I love that consistency and that deliberate, intentional focus on
Yeah.
your true mission, right? You're like, you have a mission of helping people. that are experiencing overwhelm and burnout. And it's
Mhm.
not just like a quick fix. It's not just like go on this trip for a week and your whole life will be
Yeah.
changed. You got to keep that practice going afterwards. Um,
Yeah.
but regardless, I have I haven't been on a Recal trip yet. It will be happening at some point. But I have
We're
been
gonna
on
make
another
that happen
wellness
real soon.
retreats. Yeah, absolutely. I have been on another wellness retreats, and yes, I got so much out of it, that experience, even if it's just like a weekend trip.
Mhm.
But I also have gained so much from it in terms of now I have tools for lifelong practice. And I've
Mhm.
connected with like-minded individuals. I've connected with people that I never would have before, and they taught me things. And
Yeah.
that's the other cool thing, is that like community aspect. It's like you're now going to have a network of people like yourself, of the other teachers, like Brittany we had mentioned, of the other participants that they can stay connected with and collaborate
Yeah.
with and bounce ideas off each other and be accountability buddies. Like you're literally building a community of like-minded individuals that have similar goals, that want to move forward and live just a happier, healthier life. And that's what I sense from all of that, of what you shared.
Yeah.
Um, so with that, I kind of have an idea of who the, I guess, quote, best candidates are for a Recal trip. But people that are listening, who would you say would be the best candidates for this type of work?
Yeah. The ironic part of what we're of our business, what we do, what we offer, one of the ironies is that the people that need it most potentially are the last ones to really own this and go on a trip, right?
Mm,
They are so embedded in the grind or their own ego potentially kind of to really open their eyes to and take a step back and kind of yes, they're doing maybe a lot of like self improvement stuff, but really they're not leaning into maybe the vulnerability elements of where things maybe are going wrong. The
mhm,
concept of burnout is like, oh, I'm not burnt out at all. That's a what is work life balance? That's a whatever. That's an HR driven thing here in America. That
mhm,
those people happen to maybe be the most burnt out and could really use this. But unfortunately, they're maybe the last ones to buy, kind of thing.
mhm,
So, I, when you say like the best candidate, so to speak, for a trip, it's not as broad of a stroke as just if you're burnt out, this is perfect. I think there
yeah,
needs to be this extra element of how has this person already opened up to not just again self improvement style practices, but more so. Um, have they downloaded a mindfulness app and they're trying to get into a meditation practice because they're open to the concept, whereas other people might think, oh, mindfulness, that's woo woo, breath work woo woo, Wim Hof woo woo. It's no, I'm really
mhm,
open to this and I'm willing to give this a try, and I'm trying, and maybe it's sticking in some ways and maybe it's not in others, and that's okay. That next rung down on the burnout curve type of person, um, that's kind of open and more vulnerable, and willing to try out something like this, that's probably the most willing participant and will probably
mhm,
get the most. Well, I know this, they will get the most out of a Recal trip. um, Something comes to mind. Gordon Hempton, the co-founder of Quiet Parks International, he's one of the original. They call him the sound tracker. He finds literally the quietest places in the world with all the microphone equipment and everything. He's like the OG nature record artist, right?
nice.
He's run trips before, and what he found is that the people that show up because they paid the trip price and they come here into the quiet and they have their hands wide open and they're waiting for Gordon or whoever's leading the trip to just pluck quiet out of the air and put it into their hand, and they're like, okay, sweet, I did that, check that off the box, put quiet right in my back pocket, I'm going to head on home now, kind of thing. That never works, so to speak. So
Mhm,
coming in, nobody's going to be able to hand you quiet, or nobody's going to be able to hand you a burnout remedy. That's also kind of why I don't totally believe that the wellness retreat kind of concept is really the most applicable here. You can go do the massage, you can do these things, but if you're just getting handed something, it's not going to actually get down to the root of the cause of the problem. And
Mm.
that's where on our trip, you're really challenged. And so only those that are open to the challenge, then I think they're really going to actually get the real benefits of what a Recal trip is really all about.
Wow. Yeah, it's like anything else. The more you put into it, the more you're gonna get out of it. And it
Yeah.
takes that first step of curiosity. Once you have that curiosity and that sense of awe and wonder and exploration, and you have, and it also starts with acknowledgement and awareness. That's the first
Yes.
piece. Like looking back at my previous corporate life, I was not even aware. I was not aware of myself. I was not aware of who I was, what I wanted to be, and what I wanted in my life. I was not aware of the fact that I had this overwhelming amount of stress and this
Mm.
overdrive and constant state of being in the sympathetic nervous system.
Hmm.
And when you're not aware of it, you just keep going. You just keep going. You just keep going. You wake up and you
Yep.
do it over again, and you go to bed, and you wake up and do it over again, and you go to bed. And it's like constant grind for pursuit of what? Of
Yeah.
what? Like what? More money, more things, more status.
Yeah.
Those have a time and place. Like we like certain things of that nature, but
Yeah.
when you really get to the root of it and you realize, okay, I gotta shake something up. Something has to change here. I'm not gonna be able to. This isn't sustainable.
Yeah.
Once you realize that, then that's where dominoes can fall.
Yeah, totally. I think that speaks a little bit to what you hit on earlier about constantly seeking progress, but i- are we taking that one step forward to then need to take two steps back? I mean,
Mm,
how do we really define progress? Because our hunter-gatherer ancestors 12,000 years ago certainly thought more abundance and controlled form of food would be progress. um, and I'm not shunning the fact that we moved to agriculture entirely. I'm
mhm.
not.
Mhm.
But the second that we did, all of a sudden we started to have overpopulated communities, and then we started to eat foods that really our body's not totally designed for, at least in terms of its
Mm,
variability. It's higher starched foods. Um, our metabolism really altered, and there came what they call mismatched diseases from the fact that we weren't living like hunter gatherers anymore. Our bodies just weren't ready for that type of thing. And that's just from the food. You add in the high stress of socialization, and you have so many relationships all kind of on top of each other, and then disease
yeah.
sets in, and I mean, we're just not really prepared for that. And then you double down on that 250 or so years ago with the industrial revolution. And sure, it was
Mm,
progress in a way that we didn't have to do the manual labor anymore of the farming, but
yep.
through burning fossil fuels over and over again. And now, scale that out to where we are now with the very populated world that we live in, and at scale burning so much fossil fuels, we're really realizing, okay, progress at the time, scale it out, spend some time in that progress. Well, what was that really? Let's just rethink that, and maybe that is this moment in time here today where should we take a couple of steps back? It is my
Mhm.
belief that in some ways, at least internally and through ourselves, somebody that's on that hamster wheel of the modern grind, yes, that couple steps back can be life changing for you, and that's really where I think that's our mission at Recal, to give the people the opportunity to take that couple
Yes.
steps back.
Yeah. I mean, it's touched on so many good points there. Another thing that comes to mind is just like this idea of sedentary life. And I realize I'm doing this podcast
Mm.
interview right now, sitting on a chair, but it's like the the advent of transportation and the automobile, a car,
Hmm.
things like that, right? It's like it's convenience, it's efficiency. On
Hmm.
paper, it looks like it's progress,
Hmm.
and there are certain inventions like the vehicle. It's an amazing invention. It helps us make progress, right? But then it's like we're not. And to your point, the hunter and gatherer concept. Yeah, that's convenient that we can now have farming and agriculture, but we're now removing that physical aspect of going out and actually hunting our food or
Yeah.
gathering our
Yeah.
food, right?
Yeah.
It's like now you
Uh,
can get Uber Eats directly to your door. And it's like
yeah. Yeah.
it's stuff like that where it's like, okay, we made progress, but we really have kind of taken a few steps back in a way.
Yeah.
So
Daniel Lieberman, historian, researcher, I think Harvard professor, he wrote a
mhm,
book a little while ago, The Story of the Human Body. And in that, he talked specifically about this. Our hunter gatherer ancestors used to walk, I think it was between like 6 and 9 miles a day, right?
yeah.
And they used to burn a lot of calories, of course, doing that. And I mean, the average today, he says in the book, that an average American walks today in our Western culture is 1/3 of a mile. That is the
Hmm.
average that somebody walks. Yet we're
Wow.
traveling on average like 30 miles a day.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
but it's purely because we're sitting down in that seat in our car and going somewhere, or
Hmm.
we're using other
Hmm.
various forms of fossil fueling forms of transportation where we're not really doing
Yeah.
that work and that labor. And then that's where, when you then add in the fact that we're eating these high caloric, high density caloric foods, because again,
Hmm.
that's what our body craves: salt, sweet. I mean, these are the things that our hunter gatherer ancestors never really had a lot of. And when they did, they really wanted to gorge on it. When you
Hmm.
live in a world of surplus of those things, yet you eliminate a lot of that physical activity, that's really where something like a type 2 diabetes mismatch disease kind of
Yep.
emerges. And then, yeah, it begs the question of, is that progress? um that's where progress, the word, really kind of is
Yeah.
gray. I mean, there's a gray area there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Anthony, we've touched on so many good things here. I want to be respectful of your time. There's so much more we can dive into. I'm sure our conversations will continue either online or off. But I want to wrap up with one last question. Before we do so, where can people learn more about you and Recal?
Yeah. So from a company perspective, our website's recaltravel.com. We've got an Instagram page, which is in its infancy and growing. I was never that great in my quiet period to really be on social media. So, myself and my team are really now starting to make that investment. So at uh, at Recal Travel on Instagram as well. Pretty much everything, all the handles are Recal Travel. If you want to learn more about me specifically, because I don't know why you would, but maybe you thought I was cool. Then my LinkedIn, Anthony Lorubbio, you can find me there. That's probably where I'm most active. I'm doing some things on Instagram these days too, though. Like currently doing 100 days of breath work kind of thing, where I jump into what are some situational strategies for breathwork. What's the history behind breathwork? What's the science behind breathwork? Things
Mhm.
like that. So I'm doing that on Instagram. That's at Anthony Lorubbio. Um, yeah, I think that covers the basis of the places you can find us.
Amazing. And then I think you mentioned earlier too, before we hit record, about potential discount for those that are listening if they want to check out a trip.
Yes, absolutely, man. So yeah, for any of the listeners listening now, or a part of your community that you're building, your amazing community, Dan, I did want to do a little something special. And that would be in the form of $500 off. Would be the discount I'd love to offer your folks. So that would be on any of the trips this summer. We've got our Glacier National Park trip, which I mentioned. That's June 2nd through 6th. We are then going to the Boundary Waters for 3 different dates, starting on June 9th. 2 different 4-day trips and also a 6-day trip if you really want to dive in. Then we're also, as we talked a little bit about with Brittany leading one of the trips, we've got 3 different trip dates going in Olympic National Park, where we're backpacking in the Hoh Rainforest. Those trips start, I think it's June 14th, and then a couple of 2 days and a 3-day trip option on that. So if you're interested in wanting to go on a Recal trip, $500 is all yours. We just got to figure out the discount code. Dan, if you want to come up with it on the spot, it could be Dan 500. Whatever you think would resonate.
Yeah, I like that. Let's do Dan 500.
Okay, all right, man. Dan 500 it is.
Cool. So they can go to the website and then in the order they can type in Dan 500 and that'll be 500 off.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So if you go ahead and click book on one of the trips, and then you'll go through the checkout process, it'll be, do you have a discount code to be applied to this? And if they type in Dan 500, we'll make it happen.
Amazing. I appreciate that generosity. That's awesome deal. And
Yeah.
those listening, absolutely check it out if you're not already interested and sold. The last question I'd like to wrap up with is, what does a good life, living a good life, mean to you?
Oh man. I spent a long
Loaded
time
question.
myself trying to figure this out. Um, and it took me a while to maybe stop trying to live a life that I thought others expected from me. And that was a challenge I think that I had, especially when I was started my own business and I was kind of that CEO entrepreneur of a startup. And um, and after a while, I thought that's just what people expected when they saw me or knew me. Um, and I think I really lived too much of other people's expectations. So I know what the negative answer to that is, and that's not living in the way that others maybe want you to live or perceive you to be in some way. Don't live for that image. Dive into yourself, and for me, it actually what's coming up in quite a few conversations these days for me actually is this concept of ikigai. If you've ever heard that before, ikigai, yeah, you're nodding. Okay, so you
I'm
have heard
listening
it.
to the audiobook right now.
Oh
It's a
no
Japanese
way!
word,
I
right?
Yeah, yeah, Japanese word. I think it's like the combination of life is iki, and then gai is purpose or reason. So it's all
Hmm.
about like your reason for being. Um,
Hmm.
what is the purpose behind your life? And in that, it's kind of like a four-way Venn diagram. So you've got your this is what you love part of the diagram. This is what you're good at. This is what you can be paid for, and then this is what the world needs.
Mm,
And I think in terms of living a good life, I think doing a very intentional exercise around defining those things, what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs, and where do those things intersect, and try to just strive to find a way to kind of accomplish that. I think that's going to hit on both individually, but also big picture, your mission and your purpose in the world for others too. I think you'll hit on a lot of the principles behind what I believe leading a good life. And honestly, that is Recal for me. I'm so blessed and honestly grateful that I got beat up and ground down and chewed up, spit out, and finally kind of at my wits end through that process, and disappearing off the face of the earth for 60 days. um, I think I then started to discover or rediscover my ikigai through Recal and our purpose. So that would be my answer to how I
oof.
uh, define a good life.
Throwing down the fire, man. That was so good. That was amazing. I mean, what a way to end. I think that's a great spot to wrap up conversation. And just want to say thank you
Yeah, man.
for your time and everything you're doing in this world and making a real impact. So thank you, Anthony.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, Dan.
Absolutely. Let's stay in touch. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.